No competition.
I was telling something, Marika, before you joined that, the election results will be the election results tonight, tomorrow, and for 4 more years. But Parsha Lech Lecha 5785 only comes once a year. That's it. And
Correct.
This is the only Shabbos for Lech Lecha this whole year. So I'm going to take advantage of it. And oh my goodness, what happened to the screen here? Oh, there we are, back again. Okay, wonderful. Good evening, everybody. Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining and sharing our hour together learning Parsha Lech Lecha. Let's dedicate the learning to situation in Israel, to our brothers and sisters, to the return of the hostages as quickly as possible, as healthy as possible, for an end of the fighting, for no more family to have to sit shiva, and no more family to have to be in an emergency waiting room because of any injuries. Tonight I was chatting with a woman, Dubbins at Shir Shemaim. I'll mention it's the Gilberts. So the Chazins, excuse me, the Chazins. So Mrs. Chazin just told me that tonight, for the entire since October 7th, she's been involved in making these like beanies and yarmulkes to be sent to soldiers, and she has been doing that for an entire year. So whereas some of us may have started with a certain zeal and passion, and then as things happen in life, as they always do, things get a little bit less intense. She's kept up. She's kept this up for all the time. So she gets a lot of credit for being such a blessing to the Jewish people and for helping the soldiers and families in Israel. May she be given more strength. May all of us be given more strength. So I want to try something tonight that I typically haven't done, but I wanted to try it because the piece that I want to share with you as our first piece of learning, I found really compelling, and it's a little bit longer. It's a short sort of essay, I guess, by the Slonimer Rebbe in his book called the Netivot Shalom, Nesivos Shalom. The Slonimer Rebbe from Yerushalayim passed away in the year 2000. Actually, so he's not so old. He's a much more current thinker. But I wanted to read this with you and learn with you, and I'm going to try and read and translate as we go along, because I found this to be a really important piece for a couple of reasons. Number one, and I've said this so many times in our learning together, and I completely believe this, is that as we read these stories, and they're true stories, these are stories that happened to real people. Avram Avinu did live, and he was married to Sarah, and Avram's father was Terah. The family tree is a real tree. So I'm reading a story about somebody who's no longer alive, but this story is not just about Abraham. And as you're going to hear from the Nesivos Shalom, and probably from most of the Mefarshim we've come across, whether they be Hasidic or non, the study of Chumash is predicated on the notion that there's eternal meaning here. Not a meaning that applied to Avram, but applies to us. So as we're reading this story, we're reading not just about Avraham, but we're thinking about how this is part of our journey. And everybody's on a journey. Everybody is. There's no such thing as somebody who's not. And how these messages, although they seem to be anchored about a person centuries ago, millennia ago, in some ways are so contemporary, so relevant, so today. Sometimes that's a feature of Hasidic explanations, but not always. So I want to read the first pasuk again that we're all familiar with, maybe one of the most famous pasukim in the Parsha, maybe even beyond the Parsha. And this is what it says: Vayomer Hashem el Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha u'mibeit avicha el haaretz asher areka. Hashem said to Avram, go for yourself from your land, from your relatives, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. So I want to be a little bit more literal. I'm reading from the Stone Chumash, and as much as it's a translation, as I often say, it's also an interpretation. And Stone, Art Scroll in general, openly declares, if you read through some of its background, that they use Rashi's explanation as the basis for their translation. So one more time. Vayomer Hashem el Avram. Hashem said to Avram, Lech lecha. So lech is go, lecha could be for yourself. Not 100% sure. Lecha means to you, so go to you, which colloquially make more sense to say for yourself, but lech lecha me'artzecha, from your land, umi moladetecha. So the translation in the stone is from your relatives. So the word moledet doesn't necessarily mean relatives, but those people who are part of your constellation. Moledetecha could be the family that you were born into, and umibeit avicha, and from the house of your father, and go to the land that I will show you. So that's the verse. And here is part of this amazing essay by the Slonim Rebbe. And I know this is going to be a little bit longer than the 5 to 10 minutes that perhaps we usually dedicate to a specific parshan, but I really want to read through some of it because I think it's profound. I think its message is important. I really do. And hopefully you'll see that it is also quite relevant. So the Slonim Rebbe begins by quoting the pasuk. And then he says this. There's a midrash in Breshit Rabbah, in the collection of midrashim on Sefer Breshit. Amar Rabbi Levi. Rabbi Levi says, Shtei pe'amim k'tiv lech lecha. There are 2 times in the Torah which Hashem, speaking to Avram, uses this phrase lech lecha. So we just read the first one, but there's a second one. And you may remember, it's not in this week's Parsha, but it's in Parsha Vayera. When Hashem speaks to Avram and instructs him on the Akedah to take Yitzchak and go to the mountain, there Hashem uses exactly the same phrase, lech lecha. Ve'ein anu yodim ezo chaviva ima shneya ima rishona. And Rabbi Levi in the Midrash says, the fact that Hashem uses the same language twice suggests that obviously this language is significant. But the Midrash, Rabbi Levi in the Midrash says, but I don't know which one of these 2 stories is more beloved to God. I don't know whether they're both equivalent. It sounds like it's the same phrase, but are they both exactly identical? Is there some sort of equivalency between these 2 sections, these 2 stories? Mimad ichtiv el eretz hamoriah, but then the Midrash says, well, from the fact that in the second case, that's the Akedah, Hashem specifies where he wants them to go to, whereas in our Parsha, Hashem says, go to where I show you. But in the second case, it says, go to Har Moriah. Rabbi Levi in the Midrash concludes, maybe the second one is more beloved. After all, Hashem gives more information. He's more direct. He's more specific. He's more detailed. Maybe that's how you show love, by showing more specific details about things. So is it possible that the second Lech Lecha somehow is considered to be a more important, or in his phrase, a more beloved type of interaction? And then he says the following. V'hainu demistapek ben shnei hanisyonot shene'emru b'loshan Lech Lecha ezo gadol v'chaviv yoter. And in the Siva Shalom, the Slonim says, these 2 episodes are clearly tests of Avraham. Imagine telling somebody, leave everything you know, leave the neighborhood, not just the neighbor, leave the country, not just the country, leave your parents' house. Why don't you leave all that behind? That's a test. That's a test of faith. And where should I go, Hashem? I'm not going to tell you where you should go. I'm going to just, along the way, I'll be your God positioning system. I'm going to be your GPS. And when I tell you to turn right, you turn right. And I tell you to turn left. Just trust me. That's a test. But is that test bigger than the test where Hashem tells Avram to take Yitzchak and take him and put him on a Mizbeach on Har Moriah? There are 2 nisyonot. And he says, I don't know which is a more greater test or which is more beloved in the eyes of God. Is that test of Lech Lecha in our Parsha greater, or Nisayon Akedah, or the test of the Akedah? And then he says, Lichor, but this seems like such a strange question even to verbalize. How can you even try to compare them? So the fact that Rabbi Levi in the Midrash is trying to sort of answer that question, which one is more important, which one is greater, to the Slonim says, how can you even ask that question? How can it even be a question? The test of taking your child, binding him up, putting him on an altar, it's beyond human comprehension. Of course it's a hard test. How can you even think that there's something else that might even be a greater test? It's even a greater test than trying to tell a person to give up his own life, to take your child's life. Of course, this must be the ultimate test. Especially in the introduction to the way Hashem tells him to take Yitzchak, and he says, I want you to take this son, and his name is Yitzchak, and he's the one that you love. So it's so clear just how indescribably difficult this test should be. And how can you even evaluate the dimensions, the greatness of this test? So how Rabbi Levi, the author of the Midrash, how could you be even expressing a doubt? Regarding the opening verse that we read, the pasuk in Parsha Lech Lecha, Rashi tries to explain the unusual language of Lech, go, and Lecha. Why don't you say Lech, go? That would be totally correct. Had the word Lecha not appeared in the pasuk, nobody would question whether or not the pasuk makes sense. Of course it does. Lech, go. We use that all the time. But Lech Lecha must have a different meaning. So Rashi says yes. It has this double entendre, double intention. What is Lech, number one, for your own benefit, uletovatcha, and for your own good. Lech lecha, lech for your benefit, lecha for your own good. So if lech and lecha mean that for your benefit and for your own good, are we now expected to transfer that meaning to the story of the Akedah, in which lech lecha also appears? Lech lecha, would you really say that take your son and sacrifice him for your benefit, for your good? So the Slonim Rebbe is asking some very fundamental questions here. And he goes one step further with the third question. He says, within the context of Hashem speaking to Avram, there appears 3 times where Hashem tells Avraham a message, or instructs him on some aspect of what's called halicha, going, traveling, moving, journeying. First of all, here, that's clearly the first time Hashem gives Avram this instruction of going. Then later on it says, Hitalech lefanai v'yetamin, walk before me and be pure, whole, complete. So a second expectation of some sort of halicha, journeying. And the last one, which we've already mentioned, which appears in Vayikra of the Akedah, v'lech l'chal eretz hamoriyah v'nisayon Akedah. That's the third test. So he's presented us with these 3 things, these questions that he thinks demand some sort of reflection, contemplation, and exploration. And so he comes up with the following idea. He quotes something that the Arizal, the great Kabbalist, Yitzchak Luria. The Eino Dome Adam le Adam, that you can't compare 2 people to each other. Miyom Briat Adam v'hala. Ve'ein Adam echad yachol letakein mashal chaveiro letakein. Each of us, every one of us in this Shiur and in this community and in this world and in all history, each of us was created by God. We're not happenstance, we're deliberate creations. But in that deliberate decision that Hashem made to create us, Hashem has very specific expectations about what our role in this world should be. But my role is not your role, and your role is not my role. And what I have to accomplish is not what you have to accomplish. So if I have to accomplish something different than you, then the trajectory of my life needs to be a trajectory that somehow makes sense for what I need to accomplish, my destination. And so the Slonim says, Shelakol Adam yeshed yiudo v'tafkido oto alav letakein b'chayav. Every person has their task, their role that they have to accomplish throughout the course of their life. And as a result of that, certain conditions have been brought to the world to make it possible for us to achieve what we must achieve. Now, again, this supposes a basic concept that sometimes we don't spend enough thinking about, which is what? Our lives are not meaningless. We have purpose in our lives. We do. Now, it's not always obvious to us what our purpose is, right? Sometimes we try to struggle with that. Why did God put me here? What does Hashem expect of me? Why did Hashem bring me to this moment? Why is this happening to me? So the Slonimer is reflecting a very deeply held traditional rabbinic perspective that life doesn't happen to us circumstantially. Life happens to us because Hashem is directing us in a manner that we need to go in order for us to achieve all that we can achieve or He wants us to achieve. So there's no such thing as, oh, I just ended up being here. No, you didn't end up being there by accident. You're there because something about being there is something you need to think about. All the conditions of life that a person has, whether it be in the material world or the spiritual world, whether the things seem to be good or those things seem to be deemed as not good. They're the bad parts of our lives, the misfortunes, the evil, the suffering part. All of that has happened, says the astronomer, in order to facilitate our being able to accomplish what we need to accomplish. Because only through experiencing all of these conditions is a person able to reach his goal, his purpose in life. And without these things, even the bad things or even the good things, you say, oh my gosh, I would be so much better off if I didn't have to do this. He says, no, you would not be better off because you wouldn't be able to accomplish what you are here to accomplish. All the parts, the good parts, which we're all happy about, we celebrate, we drink l'chaim, and all the parts that we would determine to be misfortunes or suffering, those parts are just as essential to who we ultimately become. And without them, we will not reach our goal. And since for every person there is a very specific role, therefore the conditions of life are different from every person. This person may have what we deem to be an easier life. But for the other person, it would seem that another person's life is filled with so much more challenge and difficulty and obstacles. And it would seem for us that everybody's life is different, and it is, and you can't compare one to the other. Even those situations in life which are clearly difficult and hard, they are also the means by which person can reach his goal. Wow. Tonight, as I said, I was meeting with the Chazins, and Mrs. Chazin, who's involved in this amazing effort that she's been doing for a year with knitting and sending these beanies and kippas, she showed me a picture. And it's shocking in how unexpected it is. It's obviously a discharged soldier. He's sitting in a wheelchair. He's not in his uniform, but he has no legs. He's an amputee. And he's putting on this knitted beanie, this big, huge smile on his face. Huge. Now, it could be fake smile, but you wonder, how can you be smiling after you went through what you went through? And yet there you are sitting and you're smiling. So maybe this is a person who understands that his enormous challenges in life somehow are part of who he needed to become. It's hard to say that. It's very hard to say that. But the Slonimer is challenging us a little bit based on this pasuk. We haven't yet fully explored that. So I want to continue a little bit through the reading of his little piece here. And he says, these ideas especially apply be'inyanim haruchaniim, in the spiritual realm of our lives. Inyanei tiviut v'tutnat nefesh, when it comes to aspects of who we are, our personality, the qualities of our soul. Every one of us, each of us, has those qualities which are peculiar to our nature and to our neshama, who we are, our personalities, which are the phrase in Hebrew is tchunat hanefesh, the qualities of your soul. Yesh nolad im midot utchunot tovot. There are people who seem to be born with I guess, I don't know, good quality of soul. They're more happy-go-lucky. They seem to be more joyous sort of personality. But there are people who seem to be dealing with, he uses the word soveil, who are carrying the burden of a personality which is less easy, more difficult, more hard-edged. People who seem to exhibit anger or some sort of desire which is not healthy, or even arrogance, and other midot which he claims to be negative. Hakol hu kadesh yuchal letakein et mashu tzarich letakein. But even these things, the astronomer says, even those tchunot and nefesh, those things which you might seem to believe are, well, you can't really overcome those. Those are so inbred. There's no changing that. You are who you are. Slomer says, no, that's not true. That's part of the journey that person has to take. Wow. Even those qualities which we would otherwise label and point to and say, that's not a good quality. That's not a good quality. But when a person is faced with the understanding that he or she has a quality which is not positive, and works on himself or herself to overcome that, and somehow changes, eradicates that bad midah, that person arrives and accomplishes his tafkid in the world. It's hard, isn't it? So a couple of things about this piece so far that I want to say. It's easy for me to read it. It's easy for us to hear it. It's not easy to live this. But what the Slonimer is saying is that woven into the fabric of our lives is this incredible divine optimism that things that appear hard are not insurmountable. But, and this I think it should be said, it's not going to be easy. I was just communicating with a friend of mine who's actually right now in Poland on the Living Legacy trip that Aish sponsors every year. So they usually do it in May. There's an extra trip that left just a little while ago for 1 week in November. And so we've been communicating with each other, and he's asking me some very profound questions about, like, do we always have to go through suffering to arrive at who we have to be? Can you arrive there? Is it possible for a person to become the best version of themselves without having to suffer? It's a profound question. The Slonimer is saying that all of that is part of God's plan. And I don't know why it's harder for some people and easier for others. I don't know. But the Slonimer is saying that that's part of the sort of divine puzzle of how this world works. But it's based and predicated on God's confidence in us that if we want, we can make changes. We are not subject. We are not subject to the sort of idea of inevitability. No, even what you think is inevitable, no, it's not inevitable. You just have to want to make the effort. Effort sometimes requires consistency. And so I'm just going to skip a little because I want to go through a little bit more. And so now he goes back to the specifics of the pasuk that we started with. Lech lecha me'artzecha u'mimoladetecha u'mibeit avicha. Go for yourself. Lech lecha, from your land, from your family, and from your home of your father. So he says this. That every one of these tests and challenges that come through to our lives for every Jew, he says it specifically, Ish Yehudi, Harei kulam hein leha'anatcha uletovatcha. Wow, big bold statement. Each of them is for your benefit and for your good. Shemovilim oto lahasig tachlito, because they all lead to making it possible for the person to reach and accomplish that which he or she needs to accomplish. It's all lehana, which is Rashi says why we have a double language for your benefit and for the good. And this is the meaning of that phrase. Lech lecha. Avram, go. Where should I go? Go to your destination, your destiny. Lech leyudcha. Go. You need to leave here because to become the person you need to become, you can become, the world needs you to become, you need to begin this lech lecha. El tikun nishmatcha ma she'ata tzarich letaken ba'olam hazeh. To the perfection of your neshama that you need to do in this world. Shezeu ikar tafkido shel Yehudi. Bold statement. Because this, says the Slonim Rabbi, this is the tafkid. This is the role of every Jew. To perfect his neshama in this world. Even if a Jew, it's a good Jew, he's a Jew that learns Torah, he davens every day, she davens every day, they do masim tovim, you look at this person and say, wow, this person's a tzaddik, a tzaddikus, look what they're doing. But even if they're doing mitzvahs, and even if they're davening, even do masim tovim, but they're not reaching what they need to reach for themselves in this world, so therefore, when we, after 120, go and we meet the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, we're standing in front of the Kisei, we're standing in front of his throne after 120 years, Hashem is going to ask us, "Nu, what did you do in this world? What did you do?" What he says, you know what that question is asking is, you didn't do what you needed to do for yourself. You're great that you daven and wonderful that you do these mitzvahs, but you knew who you could be and you didn't spend time perfecting your neshama and becoming the best version that I wanted you to become. Why? Wow. So that's what he says. That's what ultimately we're asked after 120 years. What's Hashem going to ask us? He's going to ask us is whether how many cholents did you cook? What is Hashem going to ask you? How many times you daven Shemona Esrei in your lifetime? No, he's going to say, I created you, just you. There is no other you in the whole world, ever. Since the beginning of time. That's an extraordinary thought. Each of us on this call, anywhere, we're the only versions of us ever. And there will never be another one of us. So Hashem says, why do you think I made you? I made you because you had to be you. And you didn't bother to spend the time becoming you? So Lech Lecha. Again, the Slonim are saying, this isn't about Avraham. It is about Avraham, but it's about us. Because this is the same language Hashem is trying to say to us, but through the story of Avraham. Lech Lecha, meaning Lahagia el tikun haneshama hashayach elecha uletachlit hamiu'edet elecha. That's what I wanted. I wanted you to make your neshama the best it could possibly be. So he says the origins of our soul's qualities, Tunat Nefesh, he says there are three to consider. There are those origins that their roots are in Artzecha. Remember what it said? Lech lecha me Artzecha, 1, mi moladetecha, 2, mi beit avicha, 3. So the Slonim are saying no word is extra, no letter is extra, but why did the Torah say it this way? Why didn't it just say to Avraham, go here to where I show you? And the pasuk would be so much shorter. It would have been a totally coherent pasuk. Lech el haaretz asher eka. Okay, that's it. Lech el haaretz asher eka. 5 words. So what does that mean? It means leave where I am now, Lech, and go where I show you. Finish. That's not the way Hashem spoke to Avraham. He says Lech lecha, double language. And then he says me artzecha. So there's obviously a specificity here that Hashem wants to communicate to Avraham, but to us too, because we read this once a year, but we read it and it has meaning for us. So the first he says, excuse me, there are those qualities which are rooted in your land. L'chol eretz yesh et hatchunot haraot. Every land has certain qualities which are not so positive, but are connected to it. For example, some places may be more violent. Some places may be more known for their antisocial behavior. Some places may be more known for their theft. So that is a tuna. That absolutely is. Shishorashehem mitpashtim al kol bnei aretz, and those things, that sort of lack of moral order, tends to spread and affect the people who live in that land. There are qualities that are more connected not just to Artsacha, but umimoladetecha. Those are the qualities sheyesh b'chol mishpacha v'hamidot shemitzad torasha. And those are the qualities that are more connected to our families, the genetics, the hereditary, which are our challenge. Those are things that are not broadly social, but they're more connected to who we are and in our nuclear family and constellation. And then there are those, of course, that are connected. Their origins are in Beit Avicha, the house of your father. That the behavior of parents directly influences the children. And he uses it in a light and love, sort of in a positive way, that when parents behave with holiness, sanctity, kedusha, that can have strong bearing and effect on the children. You, Avram is being told by God, by Hashem, and through Avram, I think us, you leave all the inappropriate tchunot of your land, of the family connection, and even your parents' house. Asher kol elu sheyachim la'adam lefi shorish nishmato. And all of these have an impact on the neshama and its goal in life. V'az tagiel aretz asheraka. And then you will reach the land, the destination where you are supposed to end up. L'tikuna gamur shel nishmatcha. And that's where you have to end up. Being committed to making yourself the best version that Hashem wanted. That's why you and I and all of us are in this world. Just a little bit more. It's a longer article, but I think some of these points are worth just thinking about. And you can see that the Slonimer understands that the Torah is not a book of history. You can clearly see that. It's a book about dealing with the most profound questions of life. Why are we here? What's our purpose? Why are these things happening to me? Why did this happen and not that? And why did it happen to her and not to him or not to me? He's saying, well, it's happening to the people that it needs to happen to. And if it didn't happen to you, it's because this isn't what you needed. And if it happened to her, it's because that's what she needed. You may not know what that need is because you and I have limited understanding of the big picture, which Hashem obviously sees all the time. So I'm just going to skip a little. There's some here. I'm going to skip a little. V'namar zot b'lashon halicha, and the Torah specifically talked about the idea of walking. Remember, Shlomo said that Hashem speaks to Avram in 3 separate times using the word halicha with expectation of journeying, of moving. And so says the Shlomo, l'harot shezeh tafkido shel Yehudi, because that's the expectation. That's the role of a Jew. Lalechet, to go, to journey, u'lehitkadem, and to move forward, to advance. Tamid, always, b'darko el yudo, moving to reach his or her goal in life, his purpose. And that's what is indicated in the 3-way instruction to Avram 3 times as he talked about going. Because the command, the expectation, the instruction to move forward in our service of God applies b'chol tekufot chayav shel ish Yehudi, at all the stages of our lives as a Jewish person. All the stages. Because that's when Hashem spoke to Abraham. It wasn't in a clump. Those 3 verses that I quoted, while I quoted them one after the other, weren't spoken one after the other. They were spoken to Abraham in 3 stages of his life. Says the astronomer, why? To indicate to us that we're never supposed to stop this journey. It's the first time it appears in Abraham's youth. When he was told to leave his father's house, that was in the earlier part of his life before he landed in Israel. And Hashem said, walk before me and be complete and whole. When he arrived in Israel, when he was older, but he had not reached the end of his life. He was 99 when Hashem spoke to him. And Lech Lecha, to the Akedah, was spoken to him at a later part in his life, when he was already an older person. In all the eras, stages of our lives, sarich tamid lalechem, we have to always be going and growing and moving far forward. You know, old age for Jews doesn't mean what it means for other people, possibly. Hashem is infusing us, the Shlomim is telling Hashem is infusing us with this notion of vitality. We should see old age not as a sign to, oh my gosh, I can't, and I know physically there are challenges. I'm not denying the challenges. I'm not saying that it's not a challenge. But what Hashem is saying is, your soul is not getting old. Your body may be getting old, but your soul continues to yearn for that perfection. And there should always be a yearning for us to want more, to be more, and not say, okay, I've reached the end of the line for myself. Well, that's just another way of saying death. Certainly in a spiritual sense, physically, we obviously know what that means. But according to the Shlomim, that's not what it is. So when Hashem says to Avram, I want you to walk, he's telling Avram, he's telling us that we should be embracing the idea of the ability to learn and to grow no matter what age we have. We just have to want it. We have to believe that we can. We have to believe that our neshama is worth the effort. I just want to close up the following. And he says this. Devar Hashem Arishon Shematzinu B'Torah Diber Kadosh Baruch Avraham. The first time Hashem spoke to Avraham, he told him to leave Artzacha Mimolatcha B'Beit Avicha, Keneged the Tkufa Harishona, which is parallels the earlier time in a person's life when he's younger, and he's trying to overcome all of his initial inclinations, some of which are good and some of which are not good. And his job and part of his life is to overcome that, to understand what the struggle is. The second stage is the older stage where Hashem says to him, I want you to become more perfect. Even if you went, even if the person has sort of successfully decided, I'm going to back myself away, I'm going to restrain myself from engaging in anything which is negative, says Islam, that's not enough. Just to hold yourself back from doing the wrong thing doesn't create a higher order for yourself. That's required a more active participation. You need to do something to make yourself better. That's the second stage. The first stage is, okay, recognize what needs to be, which you have to stay away from, perfect, but that's not enough. You need to now go and, as Hashem says to Avram, now be tamim, be whole with me, which means what? You need more than just, he doesn't steal, he doesn't disrespect people. Well, that's a good thing about you, but it's not the best part about you. The best part about what you can do, not what you're not doing. And the third stage, Hatikun hagamor hu inyan hanisayon sholech lecha l'eretz Moriah. That's the third step, which is the test that Hashem gave Abraham, which was to the Akedah, which is the hardest by far. Hanisayon hakasher biyoter, which is what? You have to dedicate yourself entirely. ומכל אלו התקופות וניסיונות החיים מה שיהודי מתקן בימי חייו, על ידי זה מגיע לתכליתו. In all of these three stages, in all of these tests, in all of these hardships, and all of these benefits, that's the conditions under which we reach to be the best people we can be. So it's a profound essay in the sense that I do believe that it deals with a serious and not simple expectation about what life means for all of us. So I want to move on. I know it took a little bit of time, but I think the 35 minutes of it is worth it. I hope you do too. Okay, I want to share a different way of looking at the part of this pasuk. We spent on the Shlomim, we spent a lot of time on that. But here's a different perspective from one of the former Menahel of Yeshiva Chevron in Israel, Rabbi Leib Chasman, who suggested that the fact that Hashem used a pronged instruction, as was pointed out by the astronomer, but he comes to a different conclusion. He says, do you know why it was three-pronged? Because Hashem is teaching Abraham, and again through him, he's teaching all of us, that there is an order to the way in which we grow. That in order for us to become the type of people that Hashem wants us to become, you can't skip a stage. You can't go from 0 to 100. You have to follow some sort of not, I was going to say logical, but I don't think it's about logic. You have to follow some sort of systematic development that makes sense for yourself and makes sense for your neshama. Because if you don't go, but you try to jump, as it were, over a step where you don't belong, you're not going to succeed. And you're going to put yourself possibly in some sort of danger of falling. And I'm not just talking about, you're missing a step while you go up the stairs, you could fall down, but spiritually, if you're trying to reach a goal, but you figure, you know what, I want to start keeping Shabbos. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take upon myself the hardest parts of keeping Shabbos because I really want to tackle that first. But what if you're not successful? And if you're not successful, that could be demoralizing. And a demoralized person is not a person who usually wants to try again. And so what this is suggesting is that's the point of where Hashem says to Aaron, you got to go through 3 stages. You have to go by the Artzecha, and then Mimoladetecha, and finally Beit Avicha. Because if you don't do it in this ordered manner, you're not going to reach the level that I want you to reach or that you need to reach in order to become the person that you need to become. And I think that's a really, psychologically, that's a very powerful, in my opinion, piece of Torah. That sometimes in our zeal to do something, we jump in and we don't think it through. Torah is not expecting us to jump into the deep end when you don't know how to swim. That's not smart. That's dangerous. So when Hashem says lech, and we just heard from the Astronomer, to keep moving, but keep moving in a thoughtful manner. Keep moving in a measured manner. If you end up not moving, in some ways that's a regression. But you have to know how fast to move. And that, I think, is a point that this idea is trying to speak to. Okay. There's an interesting explanation of Soloveitchik, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, former Rosh Yeshiva, Yeshiva University, offers on, excuse me, on Perek Yud Beit Pasuk 5. And as the Torah describes Avram's journey after the instruction that Hashem gave us, it tells us the following. Excuse me. Vayikach Avram et Sarai ishto ve'et Lot ben Achiv, and Avram took his wife Sarai, and he took Lot, the son of his brother, excuse me. Ve'et kol rechusham, and all of their possessions, all of what they owned, their wealth, asher rachashu, that they had amassed, ve'et hanefesh asher asu ve'charan, and all the souls they made in Haran. Vayetzu lalechet arza Canaan, vayavo arza Canaan. And they left to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. So Soloveitchik's comment that I want to share tonight with you is on the words et hanefesh asher asu v'charan, and all the souls that they had acquired or made in Haran. So what does that mean? Souls that they made. It means the work that Avram and Sarah had done as outreach workers. They were the primary first outreach workers in the world. They tried to sort of deliberately and actively engage people in conversation to teach them ideas about God that they had never learned. And so they, as it were, made souls. They took people who had been of a certain mind or mindset, and they changed them. They successfully talked enough with them, spent times with them, had meals with them to make them see things they had never seen before. And then they created a sort of entourage, people who wanted to be around Abraham and Sarah because they felt, one, beholden to them, and two, energized by this extraordinary couple who saw life in a way that nobody had ever showed them before. So these are the souls that they made. And so Rav Soloveitchik points out something so fascinating. He says the following. God did not reveal himself and provided no help to Abraham in his quest. So it's so interesting that this verse says that when Hashem told Abraham to leave, he collected everybody and all the people that he had come to teach and affect and influence. But all the people that Abraham and Sarah influenced, they did on their own. That was before Hashem ever spoke to Abraham. Meaning that Abraham came to this conclusion on his own, not because God spoke with him, and not because God gave him a job to do, and not because it was clear to him what his mission was, but he did this completely and totally on his own. And there the Rav says, Abraham made his discovery entirely on his own. Abraham's belief in God's existence solidified when he was 40 years of age. That doesn't say so in the Torah, but it says so in the Torah Sheba'al Peh, meaning that Abraham was 40 years old. That's what the Rambam says. Other people say he was 48 years old. There's an opinion that says he was much, much younger when he came to sort of begin his journey of exploration and discovery of God. But he was 40 years old. 40. Yet God did not reveal himself to Abraham until he ordered Abraham to enter the land of Canaan at the age of 75. So when Hashem speaks to Abraham in Parsha Lech Lecha, Abraham is 75 years old. He came to understand God when he's 40. So for 35 years, Abraham and Sarah went and started this massive outreach work without ever having spoken to God or ever having any miracle that demonstrated God's existence in a divine way. This was all done because of his ability to contemplate, reflect, and to commit himself to an idea. During that long interim period, God never appeared to Avram. Imagine the difficulties he faced as he attempted to defend his newly found faith. His peers surely scoffed at him, derisively inquiring, Avram, tell us, you say that there's a supreme being. Have you ever seen him? Have you ever spoken to him? And Avram searched for God without his help, proving Hashem's existence through nature. Avram could neither point out nor display miracles to prove God's existence. Yet, despite the obstacles, he built a loyal following who shared his religious vision. These are the souls they had acquired in Haran. It's extraordinary. Will that ever happen today? I don't know. But then the Rav says one other thing to conclude this third Torah. To know God means to have a desire to share one's knowledge with others, to bring the message to the ignorant and insensitive, or to those unfortunate ones who have not had the opportunity to learn and to study. That's a really important idea that I sometimes think we miss. And by saying we, many people. I don't know if there's a singularly identifiable group. But what the Rav is saying is that what made Abraham not simply say, I discovered God, and so I'm going to follow my own path and my own journey. But that wasn't enough for Abraham. He said, no, I've discovered this, but I want to share it with you. So everybody knows my own personal journey in terms of my professional journey. I taught at Nittivot for 37 years. And that was to a community that was self-defined. They sent their kids to a school because they shared the same outlook and they wanted their children educated and they wanted to create an environment that everybody felt was the environment they wanted. I switched my place of work and now I'm working at a place which does outreach. And it's a completely different perspective. And it's more in line with what the Rav is saying here, meaning I know something you don't know. So I have two choices to make. I can make one of two choices. I could say, I respect you enough to let you live your own life. I have my beliefs. I've learned something. You may not have learned what I learned. But hey, who am I to tell you what you should think? Who am I to tell you what you should believe? Who am I to do anything like that? So you live your life and I'll live my life and I'll respect you for yours and you respect me for mine. And I think for many, that's the way we've conducted our lives. Not only Jewishly, maybe even beyond Jewishly. But the Rav is suggesting that that's not the Avraham method. The Avraham method is, oh my gosh, I've tasted something amazing. I've come to understand something that is so profound, is so empowering that I want to share it with you. Can we talk? Can I tell you what I've learned? I got to tell you this. And that is like the typical Kiruv approach to things. That, by the way, although I never met Rav Noah Weinberg, the founder of Aish, but I've been reading his biography, that was his motto. You learn something, you teach something. Yeah, but who am I? I'm not a teacher. He says, doesn't matter. You learn Aleph, then teach Aleph. Yeah, but I don't even know the rest of the alphabet. Didn't matter. You know something, you teach it to somebody else. Now, Rav Noach may have had a larger agenda of why he felt so strongly about that. But this message that I think Avram Avinu is trying to convey to us, or the Rav's understanding of the message, I think is worth considering. What role do you think I should play, you should play, our community should play in bringing what we know to those who don't know it? Difficult question. Is it preachy? Is it disrespectful? Is it proselytizing? Or is it not? And I just find that to be such a fascinating thing to consider. Um, are there ways of thinking of life that hold us back from wanting to reach out? And is that the right way? I don't have an answer, but the Rav's point here certainly made me think about what some of those messages might mean. Okay. Want to go on a little bit more. So part of the story, part of the Parsha of Lech Lecha is the famous story of the capture of Lot in the midst of a regional war, a conflict, a violent conflict between 5 kings and 4 kings. And as the conflict spread and the warring parties began to capture territory, Lot, who resided in the Stone area, as we know from another part of the Parsha, was captured and was held captive because he resided in Stone, and that was where the 4 kings had come. They overran the other powers, and they held Lot captive. Lot captive. So in chapter Yudalid, 14, Shuk Yud Gimel, Torah tells us the following: Vayavoch hapalit v'yaged lavram ha'ivri v'hu shochein be'elunei mamrei ha'emori achi eshkol v'achi aner v'heim balei brit Avram. So Torah says, then came the fugitive and told Avram, the Ivri, who dwelt in the plains of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshkol and the brother of Aner, these being Avram's allies. So there's a refugee. There's somebody, a fugitive. So apparently, as Stone was overrun and Lot was captured, somebody managed to escape. And the person who escaped knew that Lot was a nephew to Avram. So this person made their way from Stone to where Avraham was camping in Elonei Mamre, the plains of Mamre, to tell him that, to Avram, that his nephew was captured. So here's an interesting rabbinic insight that brings our Torah Shiva al Peh into the understanding. So this person is unnamed in the Torah. It's just a fugitive. Okay. But Rashi says that's true. It's a fugitive, but there's a more midrashic explanation and says that the fugitive happens to be Og. The man's name was Og, yes, Og, who ultimately becomes part of the story in Sefer Devarim, which is many, many years later. But Og was the person who managed to escape the war. And he came to tell Avraham about the capture of his nephew by the kings. But the Midrash goes on to say, lest you think that this was like a public service announcement because he's such a good guy and he wanted to somehow make right, it's not right to capture and take hostages. That's actually not the motive that made him come to Avram. Midrash speculates that Og came in order to make Avram, knowing that Og knew that Avram was going to now mount up and go start a plan to liberate Lot. And in his own mind, of course, he knew how this was going to end. We got superpowers fighting each other, and Avram was just a simple guy with a small group of people who's going to get killed. But Sarah was a beautiful woman, and Og said, "Okay, so maybe this is my chance to make a move on the widow, the rich widow." And so that was the reason he went to tell Avram about Lot's capture. Okay, so this notion that Og did it for this reason is interesting. But the same Midrash that names him suggests that he was rewarded. He was rewarded for what he did because he was given longevity. He lived a very, very, very long life as a reward for what he did. Okay, but wait a second. If he did this as a reward, then rewards are given for things that have good intentions. But Og's intentions were not good according to this Midrash. Og's intention was to somehow convince Avram to begin a skirmish to go to liberate Lot, to die in the process, and to make it possible for Og to marry the rich widow. So why would I want to reward somebody with such a nefarious plot? He may have presented himself as oh God, Avram, your nephew, oh my God, you got to do whatever you can. I'm sorry, I wish I could help you. But the truth of the matter is, he didn't want to help Avram. He wanted Avram to die. So here's an interesting take on the story. The author of the sefer called Eish Tamid Ala Torah, suggests that within rabbinic thinking, we distinguish between two categories of mitzvah, and this is true in a lot of different areas. One is the mitzvah bein adam lamakom. That's the mitzvah which govern the conduct or the relationship between man and God. Those are mitzvot that we do because we're commanded by God to do them for Him. Shabbos, kashrut, mezuzah, things like that. Tefillin. Those have nothing to do with my interpersonal relationships. Mitzvot bein adam lamakom. But there's another category of mitzvot, what are called mitzvot bein adam lechaviro. Those are the mitzvot that govern our relationships with our friends. Okay, now, when it comes to the first category of mitzvot, bein adam lamakom, within the Talmudic literature, we find that there's a lot of debate as to whether or not those sorts of mitzvot require what's called kavanah, intention. So do you need intention to say, I fulfill the mitzvot that govern my relationship to God? I need intention. Or no, as long as the act is actually done, then the intention is irrelevant. Now, generally speaking, we say that, yeah, there is an element of intention which matters. And that when we behave, when we engage, we embrace the mitzvot that govern our relationship to God, it's God we're talking about. So of course you should have intention. This is your creator. You can't just engage in a relationship where you're going out on a date with somebody, as it were, and not pay attention to them. So pay attention. Attention is called kavanah. So yes, when we engage, we do the mitzvot between us and God. We should be doing so with kavanah. I'm davening. Who believes that davening just for the sake of mumbling words is really called davening? It's not. Davening is where you spend some time thinking, reflecting. Hopefully it's entering your heart, it's entering your shama. You're spending a few moments of meditation, as well as the other mitzvot that were bein adam lamakom. But there's a distinction, says the Eish Tamid, when it comes to bein adam l'chaviro. Bein adam l'chaviro, there is no expectation or requirement of kavanah. What does that mean? So if somebody comes knocking on your door and asks for a handout, and you give that person whatever you give that person, but you do so without really paying attention to what you're doing. You're on the phone, a long distance call, whatever. Somebody comes, you run, you take your purse, open it up, give the person a $5 bill. You don't say anything to the person. Oh, you may be even being a little bit dismissive, but you've given the person $5. Does the mitzvah count as a mitzvah? The answer is 100% yes. It does. So why should there be a distinction? They're both mitzvot that ultimately find their origin in Hashem, in the Torah. So why should there be one expectation of kavanah for mitzvot bein adam l'makom, and less of an expectation of kavanah when it comes to mitzvot bein adam l'chaviro? And the answer to this is the following. The answer is, yeah, because when it comes to mitzvot bein adam l'chaviro, you know what the key is? Get the mitzvah done. Because you're helping somebody. You're doing something for another person's relationship with them. That, in some ways, is the goal. Just get it done. more so than Bein Adam L'Makom. Bein Adam L'Makom, I need that extra dimension of kavanah because the relationship somehow needs it. But when it comes to Bein Adam L'Chaviro, not that I think of it as less, and not that I'm diminishing the significance. On the contrary, I'm increasing the importance of Bein Adam L'Chaviro to the point that I'm okay that kavanah is lacking. It's not the best way to do it, but if you have to do it without kavanah, get it done. Because at the end of the day, you're helping somebody else, and that's what counts the most. And so even if this palit, this fugitive, whose name is Og, who had a very nefarious intention to somehow wait for, pray for, and long for the death of Abram so he can make a move on Abram's widow, the beautiful Sarah, the rich widow, even though you can say, oh my God, he's such a low life. I give him credit, he gets a reward, for a long life. Why? Because at the end of the day, he helped Lot. He helped Lot. His message was the impetus to get Avram to go and to spring him from jail. And that deserves credit. But his intentions were bad. Doesn't matter. He did it, and he did it in a manner that brought about a desired result. So when it comes to Bein Adam L'Makom, we may do something, Bein Adam L'Chaviro, excuse me, sometimes we do things in a way that's less than perfect. But because God cherishes Bein Adam L'Chaviro so much, he even encourages the act of Bein Adam L'Chaviro when it lacks kavanah. Because at the end of the day, the kavanah matters. At the end of the day, the action matters. Helping matters. Even if the intention is less than honorable, you ended up helping another person. So that's the end of the shiur. I invite everybody to unmute themselves. I just, as I said, it was a bit of a different presentation, especially with the Nesivos Shalom. But I wanted a chance to, as I said, to take a look at something more complex, more worked out, but I think with a definitely profound message. And I hope you found that so. Please, I invite everybody to sort of share your thoughts with us, if you can. Wow. Everybody is dumbfounded. Amazing. Wow, look at this. Silent Calgary to Toronto. We can't find anybody who can put a sentence together. Come on, guys. Let's do a little better than this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. I'm glad that you joined, Jonathan. Yes, okay.
I want to tell you something.
Ralphie, Kitty, thank you for joining.
Rabbi Diamond, if I may share something really charming. Yes. For my daughter, she was grade 1 in Eitz Chaim. All right?
Yeah.
Grade 1. And every Friday before Shabbos, I put the change of pocket into the tzedakah box, okay?
Okay, good.
Charity. And as I was doing it, my little 6-year-old told me, stop, you're not doing it right. What do you mean I'm not doing it right? She said, you were not smiling. It's a little cute, charming thing, but you know what? I still think about it when you mention about charity and giving. It's not just the act itself, but how we execute it. And sometimes we are so wrapped up in our everyday busy life, you don't pay attention to that. And it's a little reminder. It's
a lovely story, and you're right.
It's cute. As I said, from a 6-year-old, I love that school. I can tell you, I really enjoyed sending my daughter to Eitz Chaim. It was a pleasure, not because I'm feeling it was a nice because not just the education, but sort of like it was more depth. And up to date, sort of, it paid off. One of the best investment the parents can do, send your child to a good school.
I agree with that.
Life. Yeah, that's so. I
agree with that.
Charity.
But Marika, what made it special was that your child saw you doing what she learned at school at home.
Exactly.
So sending a child to school is only one part. The other part is what you do in the home. And I think most often what the child learns at home is going to have more impact often than what they learn at school, because it's their mother and father that they see as their primary role models. And that's a big responsibility. You want a partnership. You want the school and the parents to be working together. The best way is when that happens. Doesn't always happen that way, but
Right.
don't downplay what you did. The fact that you were putting the money in the pushka every year of Shabbat, that's the key part to that story in my mind. Not just about the smile, but that she saw you doing it and she understood how important it was. So you got to
She
give
carried
yourself a
that
little
good.
bit of credit there, Marika.
Yeah, it's
You
a
should
good
take
midah.
credit.
She carried up to date. She's during the up to October the 7th, elderly people from different part of the country ended up in an old age home. They were farmers, and she were teaching in an old age home how to make cookies and biscuit. And I was really impressed, and they really enjoyed the relationship. It was a different aspect of her life, and it's nice. She carried it up to date. It's good. It's good. Paid off. All right.
Wonderful. Okay, everybody, I want to thank you so much for coming out tonight. I know that there was some possible distractions. So kol hakavod to all of you for overcoming those distractions. And I wish everybody a week of bracha. We should see a week of good news, of simcha, of health, of the return of the hostages, and shalom al Yisrael.
Amen. Thank
Okay,
you, Rabbi.
everybody,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much for
Thank you,
joining.
Rabbi.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.